new money that was disrupting money once again, and it's just been a pattern of disruption before that. You know, some people here use PayPal. I mean, I have PayPal and paper money, cash. Let me bring your attention to rhinestones, 6th century, something back there. That looks, people of course used to use trinkets and shells, but let's drill down on 6th century. And what is that? That is, let me hold this. Those are big, there's an island of stone money, Yap, it's in the Pacific, and they actually use these huge, several ton stones as money. They carve this into sort of a donut shape, disc, and these things are made out of limestone. And, you know, they're various sizes. Now, of course, you know, if you look at that, you say to yourself, it seems so impractical, right? These things are so big. One advantage in Europe, if you got mugged, they wouldn't get very far with them, right? But for practical purposes, they really don't trade these things. What they really do is use an oral tradition to move it around. So therefore, if we're going to engage in a transaction, I'm going to say, my stone now belongs to you, and we'll tell that to everyone in this room, and now through consensus, we would all agree that he's the owner. And if I tried to spend it again, everyone in this room would stop me from doing so. So what do we have here, actually? What we have is something, let me move forward. This is actually kind of like a ledger, right? And this is the beginning of how Bitcoin actually works. Everybody in the village kind of remembers who owns what. And look, this was done 1,400 years ago. And of course, people have to remember this, but through consensus mechanism, we have a system in which we are keeping track of ownership without having any central authority, without having a central record keeper. So this was done quite a while ago. Now, I'm going to move to 10 years ago, and that's when the Bitcoin paper came out by Satoshi Nakamoto, so at least some guy who has that name. Or we don't know who the person really is, but is it somebody from Australian? Did that person know about the island of Yap? You know, it's possible. And let's move on. Like what happened 10 years ago? I mean, if you think about the time, like 10 years ago, I mean, three big things, which of course was the economic crisis of 2008. A lot of people in New York got laid off during that time. And one thing that's been happening, this is the cultural issue, has been a sort of a loss of trust in society. That is, whether it be governments or religious institutions, this is in general, right? There's sort of less trust going on. Like Morgan, big companies, people have a feeling culturally of less trust. And I kind of moved up. Let me move. Sorry, I think I get a little bit delayed here on my device. And allow people to process. Let me just show you this. This is the front page of the Times of London in January 2008. And what we have here is Chancellor on Bridge of Second Bailout for Banks. That headline is actually embedded in the very first Bitcoin transaction. The guy who wrote the paper also developed the code, and the very first Bitcoin transaction has this message embedded in it. So therefore, we can sort of conclude from that clearly there was some issue with complaints about banks, concern about the banking system. And that's kind of a little data point. Now, about Bitcoin, I mean, what's different from what came before? Well, there's PayPal, right? But the big thing is decentralization. So sort of like in the island of Yap, where people can trade the stones without having any central authority. Well, Bitcoin is a protocol that allows you to do that. So if we imagine going to the island of Yap and they said, hey, we want to program this system out. Well, you know what? The Bitcoin protocol is sort of would be part of the answer of how one would do that. As we saw in the example of the island of Yap, is a public verifiable ledger. So that's sort of like the DNA in your body, right? It's sort of the same from your toe to your finger. If I had hair, it'd be also in my hair, right? So it's the same all over our body. So that verifiable ledger is replicating everywhere. Therefore, if one node goes down, it's still there. I'm going to talk about open source code in a little while, but that's another thing that's different about Bitcoin. So here's just a picture of centralization versus decentralization. If you can imagine Facebook, right in the center of everything. And if you were starting a business, clearly it wouldn't be bad to start a business and be at the center and you'd start collecting monopoly profits or have information, right? That's kind of a traditional business model. And even if you're not charged anything, your data can be used and sold. So, there's no free lunch. Somehow that model has to generate revenue. And, okay, we moved on to public verifiable ledger. This is an example of the public verifiable ledger, and I showed earlier the ledger, the second old-fashioned ledger, like the DNA we buy. And finally, let me just go into the rationale for open source code. I'm not confused. Back in the day, in the 80s, when computers first came out, you would have your IBM PC and you'd load software, and then you'd use the same software over and over again, and there were no viruses back then, right? Everybody sort of played safe computing. As soon as you connect computers together, well, that means all of a sudden there could be a virus, the computer program that you used yesterday could be different, right? So there's something about connecting computers that, wow, we don't know what's going on. So I'm running a program that could potentially be different. And that lends itself not just to viruses, but also it could be, and somebody can introduce a bug that affects me. And if I have open source code, with open source code, at least I get to see what's going on. I can trust what's going on in the code. So even if I can't read the computer program, at least I trust that somebody else will be able to read the computer program. So that's one of the advantages of open source code. I'm going to now, before I go into the life cycle of Bitcoin, talk about a couple of things, and that is this concept of triple entry counting and also cryptography, which is sort of at the heart of Bitcoin and how it works. So I used to trade bonds. So an example, what I would do is we get on the phone or a chat and we agree on a deal, and then we send them, you send money, you send me the bond, fine. And typically it will take 3 days, trade date, settlement date. And usually that would work, but sometimes there'd be some kind of error, like the number is wrong, that sort of thing. That's a real pain to have to deal with that. So here's an example. Let's say I have my ledger, the other guy, my counterparty, has their ledger. Now, what if we had some kind of central ledger, okay? And if we did, I just did this on purpose. I made this numbers where they don't agree. Like, I put 101.45, and my counterparty did 101.54. We have to have what's wrong is kind of a pain. If we had a central ledger, then that would be the determining factor of what was correct. We would agree that what's on the central ledger is the correct one. And if we agreed that from the very beginning, we could potentially save a lot of time in reducing errors and not having to deal with the pain of resolving issues later on. But the problem with doing that is, well, let's say if we did that. If we did have a central ledger, frankly, then I wouldn't need to keep my ledger, my accounting books. In fact, the other counterparty will need to keep their accounting books either. But of course, we don't trust that. I have to have my own ledger, right? Well, if you truly trusted the central ledger, imagine one gigantic set of accounting books that everyone uses, it's possible only if you really, really trust it. And if that were the case, that means that this concept of doing a trade and then we'll settle it later, in fact, that becomes one thing. That is, the receipt becomes a transaction conceptually. But if we did that, again, we'd have to have ultimate trust in whoever is managing the central ledger. And that's why this word, the God protocol, sometimes that's been used with Bitcoin. That is, suppose you would suspend judgment and there's this sort of somebody that you trust 1,000,000%, okay, like 1,000, infinity, right? If that existed, then whenever we traded, we would trust that the deal would work. For instance, I buy something on eBay. Whenever I send money to somebody in Idaho or so, I mean, I hope I get my stuff. And yeah, I usually do, but you can see people's ratings, right, 99%. But if I don't get it, am I going to go to Idaho to sue some guy and his uncle is the judge or something like that? It's just, we know that's not going to happen.